Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. It's time for us to say farewell to the Sandman. Previously! Known as clicking on part 4 of a Sandman retrospective before the other parts. Let's dig into the Sandman, number 60 to 75, and put this one behind us. In all seriousness, we're in the middle of The Kindly Ones, the penultimate storyline of the book, and the longest, 13 issues in total. We've covered the first 4 already, but the rest of this retrospective is this story and its aftermath, so let's just get right into it. Lita Hall is still under the care of the Gorgons, who want to transform her into Medusa, but she rejects them. Her revenge is more important than anything else. Also because her hair is being transformed into snakes, and she really doesn't need any pets right now. We learn that Rose Walker is living in Los Angeles for the moment to take care of someone dying from AIDS. The implication, especially given we saw that her friend Hal had moved out this way, is that it's him, but no. It's actually Zelda, one of the spider ladies, whom, as I pointed out, weirdly resemble the two Gorgons, even though, nope, different characters. Zelda's in hospice care right now, having gotten AIDS from Chantal, who in turn got it from a kidney transplant and is dead already. She's in rough shape, of course, almost skeletal at this point. However, as Zelda slips in and out of consciousness, she delivers a message to Rose from her grandmother, Unity Kincaid, who contacted her via the dreams. She needs Rose to return to England and where she used to sleep. She'll give her back her heart, in reference to what seemed to happen in the doll's house. She says that, but you know it's just a ploy to get her granddaughter to come back to her because she never visits. In the dreaming, Morpheus has completed the recreated Corinthian, and they talk a bit. Morpheus reused some bits of the old Corinthian to make this one. Can't afford to be wasteful, you know. I mean, there's just such a finite amount of dream material after all. And thus he retains some vague memories and inklings of who he was before, but is otherwise just finding out who he is for himself. Matthew does not trust him given what happened before, but Morpheus says he'll have to get over it because he's sending the two to retrieve Daniel. Nuala, meanwhile, has been returned to the Fae. She's still sad about Morpheus not fighting for her, but she also recognizes how cool it is she can summon him anytime she likes. And Queen Titania is just bitter because Morpheus seemingly never talked about her. Meanwhile, Clara, Lita's friend, goes down to the police to try to figure out what's up, but they reveal that they don't have any officers matching the description of the two who had come to see them. Getting nowhere with that, she enters Lita's apartment and discovers the photo of the burnt Daniel, but then the photo comes to life and spontaneously combusts. She talks with Rose about it, and both agree something's up. Carla wants the two of them to team up and investigate, but Rose is off to England to look into the message from her dead grandma, so Carla's on her own. One of the cops she spoke to takes her at gunpoint, or rather at cigarette point, since it's revealed to be an illusion, and it turns out to be Loki, who kills Carla by setting her on fire in his car, and reveals that he's doing this because he refuses to be beholden to anyone, let alone Morpheus. Loki of Asgard, burdened with glorious douchebaggery. That brings us to issue 62. It's Rose's return to England, which she spends hanging out in the nursing home Unity spent all her time in. Paul, whom you may recall from all the way back in the first storyline, represents the investors who own the nursing home. Alex Burgess still sleeping in one part of it. The story kind of feels like filler, There's a story told by one of the residents of the home about the importance of revenge, especially on very bad people. You could probably argue that the three women Rose talks to are meant to be representations of the Furies. She even tries to find them again, as she had before, but they don't match the pattern we've seen for their appearances so far. The issue is just so inconsequential, other than to remind us of a few things like Burgess is still sleeping or the like. I suppose it's to establish Rose's situation, since we'll be seeing more of her over the next few issues, but it doesn't really have a lot of meat to it, and her plot does not really dovetail into the larger one with the kindly ones. I don't know, maybe you guys can talk about a deeper meaning to it in the comment section. You've had some incredible insights so far, but for me, I'm not seeing it. In any case, issue 63 begins with, of all people, Thessaly returning to the plot, tracking down Lita as she sits near a bunch of homeless people. She now goes by Larissa, because I guess she needed to alter her identity after the apartment building collapsed, so we'll go with that for her name from now on. Back in the dreaming, Odin arrives at the gates to speak with Morpheus. "And who are you then to demand entry? I do not enter the houses of my enemies. I demand only that your master come out and talk. I became a vampire. Weird, I know, but weirder things have happened in Norse mythology. As for who I am called Grim, the Death Blinder, the High One, the Gallows God. I am called Gondlir the Wand-Bearer, and I am Grimnir the Hooded One, the Terrible, the Wakeful.
There are some who call me Tim."
Morpheus does come out to talk, and Odin explains that he's found out about Loki escaping his fate, and he is naturally pissed that he aided Loki in this deception. Morpheus confirms it all, including that he had the design of using him for some task in the future, and Odin calls him a fool. Loki does not like being beholden to anyone. It burns at him, and he will bite you after you've helped him. It's just his nature. Odin also says there have been rumors floating around Morpheus for some time now, but what those rumors aren't discussed. Odin says there's no real beef between the two of them, just because it's kinda Loki's fault for tricking him like this, but disappointment that he was tricked. However, Odin does ask a relevant question, the same one I brought up last time, though far more poetically. Are you a spider who spun a web of cunning and deceit, and now waits patiently for his prey to come to him? Or are you a deer, frozen by the light of a hunter's flame as disaster comes toward you? Or are you the bored office worker who comes home on Friday night, puts his feet up, and turns on reruns of MasterChef because who wants to use their brain right now? Over to Delirium, who is currently searching for Barnabas, the talking dog, and recalled that when she was looking for destruction, going to Destiny had solved that for them, so she figured she'd check with him first. He tells her nothing other than she'll find it if she looks for him, though she'll find other things too, and she gets distracted by something in his garden. The statues of the Endless. Morpheus' statue has changed, now depicting his head in his hands, almost as if he was weeping. So I'm gonna throw a theory out here, and you're free to discard it. It doesn't alter what is a big theme of this series, ties into it in fact, but I think that Morpheus suffers from trauma, or at least the Endless's equivalent of trauma, ever since he was imprisoned by Burgess. It comes back down to something he said to Alex after he was freed. Time passes no more quickly for him than it does for anyone else. He was stuck in a glass ball for 80 years with no activity, no freedom, his tools and power stripped from him, and all this right after some cosmic battle that he fought and won. Mere mortals took him and reduced him to a prisoner. For Morpheus, he is his responsibilities, his duty. He is the king of dreams, and that is the beginning and end of his existence. He might have diversions, he might fall in love, but he's a workaholic who defines himself by his job and his title. When Nada rejected him, the Prince of Stories and Lord of Dreams, he sentenced her to hell for this rejection of his station and power. But then comes this mortal who takes everything from him for decades, freed only by a stroke of luck. He's shown to be weak, vulnerable, and his title and power mean nothing. Destruction showed that you could walk away from being one of the Endless and it would affect nothing. His kingdom fell apart without him, and he had to go through a grueling journey to regain what he had lost. But in short succession, he then had to deal with new responsibilities, over the fate of Hell, over his past misdeeds, needing to accept that Hob, another mortal, was indeed a friend, that he has need of companionship, and the world has changed around him and he can never return to what he was. His entire sense of self has been shattered, and it is slowly eating away at him. He wants to deny that anything has changed, continually questioning anyone who points it out, and he even killed his own son. It's all coming apart, and whether consciously or unconsciously, he knows it. The Sandman, to me, is the slow story of a man coming to grips with his own pain and trauma, that he is changed forever. Now, most people agree with the fact that this story is about his change and dealing with it, but many think the inciting incident is really him killing Orpheus. I personally think it goes all the way back to the start. But yes, that's what we've been building to throughout the book, regardless of whether it's trauma or not, like I think. The world has changed as Morpheus himself has changed. Gods lose their power. Society's attitudes and ethos alter. Kings only have as much power as people give them. Morpheus at one point scoffs at Matthew about the story of the emperor has no clothes. Regardless of whether he's naked or not, he's still an emperor. But to paraphrase the ending line of Patton, as the slave said to the Roman conqueror returning home in victory, all glory is fleeting. But let's get back to the story, and an interesting thing happens as Delirium talks to Destiny. She asks if she should try to cheer him up, but Destiny flickers. There are two of him for a moment, giving conflicting advice, one suggesting she let him cope on his own, the other saying that she might be able to help. I wonder if that's a frequent thing, that sometimes the book doesn't contain all knowledge, but rather two possibilities that, like Schrodinger's cat, exist simultaneously until the state of the universe unfolds as it will. Larissa takes Lita back to her place, implying that the Furies helped her find the poor woman. She starts setting up magical protection for her, both from creatures she's going to encounter, but also protection from physical harm in the real world. Lita, as you can see, is not hearing any of this. She is mentally checked out as Larissa continues her spell studies. So, it's wash off the blood and sleep on the floor, or skip the bath and sleep in the tub. Choices. Always choices. First choice, order pizza or order Chinese, because we're gonna be in this for the long haul and you could probably use some food. Wherever Lita's spirit and mind are, they eventually come to a mirror, her last chance to stop her quest. Different aspects of her say that she can stop this at any time, that this isn't what she wanted growing up, that she's a superhero, that there's always a choice, but as far as she's concerned, she has no choice at all, breaking the mirror and finally meeting with the Furies, aka the Kindly Ones. While she explains that there is someone that she needs to destroy, Matthew and the Corinthian arrive at Lita's apartment and discover Daniel is missing, deciding to go searching for him. Unfortunately for Lita, the three witches reveal that they can't do anything about this. Putting aside that Morpheus didn't kill Daniel, now that she listens to that part, they can only avenge a blood debt, if he had killed his own child. She leaves, disappointed and hurt, and hurting herself as she grips her own arm, but they stop her. After all, Morpheus did kill his own son. And that brings us to issue 64, which features a recounting of Morpheus's daily activities, journeying through dreams, acting as an arbiter to various beings, eating dream rice. Truly the greatest activity one can have in his profession. The whole thing, even at this point in the series, is to illustrate that he's not just sitting on his ass in his throne room day in and day out like I've been joking about in regards to Lita. He has his responsibilities and duties and dreams, which he continues to do even after Odin's visit. Though he also takes time to do regular things, feeding the pigeons, for instance. He walked across the park and watched an open-air performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream. He was mildly disappointed by the translation. It was much better in the original Klingon. He was, however, extraordinarily amused by the performance of the actor playing the part of Bottom. Behold, the face of a man who is extraordinarily amused! Delirium stops by to ask for his help in looking for Barnabas, but he says he can't because of his responsibilities. You use that word so much, responsibilities. Don't you ever think about what it means? I mean, what does it mean to you, in your head? Mostly stuff about Spider-Man. I really like Spider-Man, dear sister. Rose hooks up with a guy in England, the butler from a family of butlers who assisted Unity, and in turn her and her mom. Meanwhile, Matthew and the Corinthian track down Carla's burnt body. He's able to place her eyes in his extra mouths and see what they saw in her last moments, able to discern what it is that happened and who took Daniel. On that subject, though, the Kindly Ones arrive at the Dreaming, being multiple beings at once, including Lita Hall herself. They kill one of the gate guards when she refuses to let them enter, Morpheus allowing them in afterwards.
Now, take his coat.
They warn him of their task. They will destroy the Dreaming, everything he has ever loved, and in the end, they will kill him. Lita says they're doing this for Daniel, but of course the Furies explain that because he killed his son, he's their prey. He balks at this. It's his realm, after all, where he controls and holds power. They can't destroy him or it, but they remind him that they killed his guard, so he may not be as all-powerful here as suggested.
Now, don't take his coat.
Morpheus calls up Matthew and the Corinthian to check on their progress, confused why they're not back yet. But given Lita just said she thinks her son is dead, you'd think he'd have figured out things are not going to plan at the moment. The two aren't even in the waking world anymore, but the Corinthian reassures him that they'll have Daniel soon. I have a certain amount of faith and confidence in both of you. It would disappoint me exceedingly to find that it had been misplaced. I mean, after the kindly ones have destroyed everything, I won't have any other employees aside from you two, so it'd be really awkward to fire you. Wherever Matthew and the Corinthian are, they're attacked by a wolf, one that they're able to kill, pleasing the Corinthian to no end. And in England, Rose Walker sadly discovers that her new boyfriend is involved with someone else after she had been gushing about how happy he made her. Well, dude, hope you enjoyed breaking the family business with your infidelity. Everyone's making good decisions today. We go into issue 65. Rose, heartbroken over the butler dude, takes a visit with Paul to the Burgess' old estate, eventually finding the secret passageway into the dungeon where they kept Morpheus. Here, though, she discovers Desire waiting for her. They don't really say much, explaining that they're her grandfather and only that they're not going to hurt her, except with love. And indeed, Desire does so, though it's mostly Rose doing it to herself, spilling her guts about how painful and terrible love is, makes you vulnerable, and you give a piece of yourself to someone else, and then your life isn't your own anymore. She just kind of breaks down, but then is found by Paul, who leads her away, but they do find a little lighter in the shape of Desire's sigil. A heart. I do not get the point of this subplot. Back with our hunting party, Matthew keeps feeling something trying to pull him back to the Dreaming, but the Corinthian tells him to fight it. They storm into the castle where Daniel is held and spot Morpheus.
Matthew, you and your friend have done well. I am proud of you both. You have won through all the trials and travails that I created to test your loyalty. You may both now return to the Dreaming to receive your reward. Yes, this was totally a test of loyalty. Being who has been loyal to me for several years and has done nothing to cause me to doubt that, you can count on me, Drim of the Endless.
Matthew is shockingly not certain, but the Corinthian does not buy it for a second. Then uncreate me now, if you have the power, for I shall stand against you. I am young, true, but I have age within me, and you are not my lord. Man, Morpheus should have made a 2.0 of the Corinthian sooner. His lines are a hell of a lot better than his stupid speech to the serial killers. He chokes Loki into unconsciousness, but as he said, to kill a god would be a bad idea, even one as hated as him. Still, there are ways of making him talk, and the Corinthian is ever so curious what it's like to see through the eyes of a god. Matthew is once again drawn back to the Dreaming as the kindly ones pick their next target, Fiddler's Green, which they murder in the form of Gilbert. He laments that he doesn't know why they did this, but that he wished he had died another way. Morpheus admits to Matthew that he wasn't the one who brought him back, but now knows that he has to settle things. He has to kill Lita Hall since she started this. However, he then meets Larissa and... well, this is weird. The implication in the dialogue is that she was the one he was dating right before the brief live storyline, but how? She already seemed pretty pissed at Morpheus when they met in A Game of You. They had clearly met before, and Morpheus seemed mostly disinterested with her, so what would cause them to fall in love? I can believe that they had been a thing in the distant past, but being the one from that relationship doesn't really work timeline-wise, and it's a massive time skip to do this. I don't know, maybe their first date was hunting down the cuckoo for some reason, and it was just a wild, passionate affair that they thought was something more. The magic protects Lita even from Morpheus, and he asks why she did all this. Morpheus wonders if she did it just to hurt him, but she explains that she made a deal with the kindly ones long ago. It extended her life, so she owed them. It's not said out loud, but it seems to be that for whatever reason, they wanted to kill Morpheus. Probably because of the sun killing, but needed someone like Lita to ask them to do it. They couldn't just do it out of nowhere. Anyway, Morpheus says that he could kill Lita indirectly, but that would violate the rules. Your kind are so bound by your idiot rules. No, it would be more accurate to say that Morpheus is. After all, destruction broke the rules. We'll come back to this. Morpheus leaves, Larissa being a dick to him even while she's trying to help get him murdered. I know I keep harping on this, but if she is the one who was the romance during that time, it's really weak writing to not show them as a couple before this, because otherwise her motivations and personality are just out of nowhere. Hell, she's essentially a stranger to the audience. We barely learned anything about her in A Game of You, but she's playing a very important part of this story. Anyway, Matthew learns from other ravens, who have been coming into the Dreaming for a few issues now, that all these mystical ravens are being compelled to go there because there's gonna be a battle. With a lot of corpses, mostly the Dreamings. However, on the subject of battles, the Corinthian has finished his with Loki and finally retrieves Daniel, bringing him back to the Dream Palace for issue 66. Odin also retrieves Loki to put him back in his punishment. He tries to get Thor to kill him, but Odin tells him, of course, that Loki's full of it.
See, Loki, life is about growth, it's about change, but you seem to just want to stay the same.
God, that is such an appropriate clip for this one. Anyway, we have a brief interlude in the land of the fairies, where Nuala takes off her glamour, which apparently insults Queen Titania. God, she's like the assholes on dating apps who get upset when a woman isn't wearing makeup. Cluracan covers for her, trying to say it was all a bet, and that mollifies her. But Nuala then learns of Robin's alliance with Loki, and that it could mean the death of Morpheus. Speaking of death, in the Dreaming, most of the Dream Servants have fled the land or retreated into Morpheus's palace, but Merv Pumpkinhead has decided to try to do something about the Furies, organizing some of the Dreams to fight them, and it goes poorly. You? What are you? Me? Lady, I'm your worst nightmare! A pumpkin with a gun! This is how Halloween looks to people who don't like the holiday. In the Dreaming, Lucian is pissed. Normally the most loyal of Morpheus' servants, but his refusal to take any action against the Furies or restore any of the ones they've destroyed is wearing down on him, and he's yelling at the dude. Morpheus explains that the Furies aren't going to leave until he's destroyed, and his plan to stop them by killing Lita has been thwarted, so he's considering his next course of action carefully. Over to Nuala, who, worried about Morpheus, runs into Delirium, who's still looking for Barnabas. Delirium admits that he is in trouble, that she tried to convince him to leave the Dreaming, but he refused to. Unfortunately, that gives Nuala an idea, recalling his gift to her. She runs off and calls to him, asking him to come to her. He asks her to do this some other time, but she insists he come for her boon. He does so, and she explains about what Robin and Delirium said. He confirms he's in trouble. However, as long as I remain in the Dreaming, no real harm can occur. My lord, you are no longer in the Dreaming. No, I am not. Well, in her defense, dude, you could have explained that to her. You could have explained things to Lita. You could have explained things a half a dozen other times. You really, really suck at explaining things to people, and it keeps ending up screwing you over. Have you noticed that? And we move into issue 67. The Corinthian returns to the Dreaming in its damaged state, finding Cain. Cain, as you'll recall, is still under the protection of God himself, so he's immune to the Furies. Okay, what we've got to do is duct tape Cain to Morpheus and he'll be okay. The two bring Daniel to the castle, which acts as a place of refuge, for the time being anyway, since, as they note, Morpheus is gone and his protections are kind of in limbo right now. There were to be apartments built for you in the castle, Corinthian, but they were never constructed, and now there is no one left to construct them. I know this makes your job less and less appealing, but I promise you, you'll still be getting free dental, which, you should really appreciate. Morpheus explains to Nuala what's going on with the Furies, how they have power to avenge family killings, but it seems it's only here, to Nuala, can he confess to the truth of it all. I killed my son. It was what he wanted, what he craved. In my pride, I abandoned him for several thousand years, and then, at the last, I killed him. You want them to punish you, don't you? You want to be punished for Orpheus's death. After a pause, Morpheus talks about his imprisonment in Burgess's glass bottle. I told Ishtar that she was wrong, that I was not changed, that I did not change. But in truth, I think I lied to her. Whether it happened because of his imprisonment or because of killing his son, Morpheus wants to die, and he himself has been the grand orchestrator of his own demise. More on that later. Nuala suggests that he could just keep going from realm to realm fleeing the Furies, but no. He has to return to his realm and do what he must, giving his farewell to Nuala, who admits her own love for him. Back in the waking world, things are not so lovely. Rose has returned to LA to discover that Zelda died while she was gone. She admits in narration that in the back of her mind, she just hoped that a miracle would happen, but nope. As the remaining survivors of the dreaming converge in the castle, the twin destinies become multiple destinies, all possibilities soon folding back in on themselves into only one. This will be felt across worlds and days as a reality storm, and as it plays its course, conflicting realities will fall and spin and shatter across time and existence. So if the reality storms coincide with event comics and one of the endless dying, who do you think was in trouble for Infinite Crisis? My money's on Desire. Just a hunch. Final Crisis was delirium. Morpheus returns to the dreaming and the castle, but as said, his absence means it's no longer a place of sanctuary. The Furies arrive and actually injure his face when he orders them to leave, but then Lita spots Daniel. She forces them to retreat, saying that if Daniel isn't dead, they don't have to do this, they should be trying to rescue him, not take revenge. But Lita doesn't get it and never has. Even if their mandate wasn't purely revenge, they're here because Morpheus killed his son. Daniel's supposed death was just an excuse to get the ball rolling. With the Furies retreated for the moment, Morpheus knows that it's time to finally do what he has to. As he suits up in a manner reminiscent of when he went to confront Brute and Glob, he asks Lucian to bring him both Daniel and an emerald in his possession. He needs to speak to the child first. He recalls Nuala encouraging him to flee forever. Rules and responsibilities. These are the ties that bind us. We do what we do because of who we are. If we did otherwise, we would not be ourselves. I will do what I have to do. And I will do what I must. And what I must do is... run away! Sucks to be you, Lucian! Next up is issue 68. After completing his talk with Daniel, Morpheus speaks with Matthew, warning him that the Corinthian believes that he abandoned him during the encounter with Loki and is pissed, but he says he'll explain it wasn't his fault. The emerald, he explains, is a dreamstone, one of 12 that he created a long time ago. One of them was his ruby, as we saw at the start of the series. There were others. A rose quartz I gave to poor Alienor, and she went off and did her own thing, founded a rebellion. It's complicated. Just watch Steven Universe, Matthew. He explains to Matthew about facets, that the facet is not the jewel, but a part of it. It's his own roundabout way of explaining the nature of being Dream while also being Morpheus. Matthew wonders why he can't just wave the Furies away, but as always, Morpheus simply explains that there are rules against such things. He wants to send Matthew away, but Matthew explains that he can't leave if he doesn't want to, and he wants to stay and help Morpheus, even if it certainly means neither of them are coming back. Meanwhile, Rose Walker goes and sees Hal, the former owner of the boarding house, who has been making it big in LA as a celebrity drag queen and singer. Apparently Rose and him got into an argument at one point, but she's come to bury the hatchet, especially as Zelda is dead. Unfortunately, Hal doesn't want to go to her funeral because of some issue that cropped up between issues. And meanwhile, Delirium, still hunting for the dog, finds herself in Lucifer's piano bar, where the devil has been contemplating returning to hell because all night people have been requesting Piano Man over and over. He asks if she has any requests, and there are two: to find her dog, and to keep her brother safe. Sadly though, while Lucifer admits that he owes Morpheus for giving him the impetus to leave, it's on Morpheus's head here. He told him that there was always freedom, to leave in particular, and at this point, it's too late to help him. Morpheus waits on some rocks and talks with Matthew, telling him what happened to the other ravens in his service. Some tired of service and wanted to just die. Two stayed in the dreaming and other roles, like Lucian, but before he can say any more, the Furies arrive. He asks them one final time to leave, but of course they can't leave until their task is done. He can try to fight them, but he can't even touch them. They're pretty much incorporeal in any way. They'll be satisfied with nothing less than his death. Speaking of, Death herself arrives at the castle. The Corinthian knows who she is, and it warns Death that it will protect Daniel from her touch, even if it means his death. Ugh, Morpheus, this model of the Corinthian sucks too. He's supposed to be a dark mirror of humanity, but he's self-sacrificing. Take him back to the shop. With no alternative, Morpheus recognizes what must happen.
We make choices. No one else can live our lives for us, and we must confront and accept the consequences of our actions.
Those words were originally spoken to him by Destiny, and he has made his choice. He sends Matthew away on his final task, taking his helmet and sand pouch for safekeeping, and then he tells Matthew to bring his sister to him, and then he strips off his cape, gloves, and shirt.
Well, Furies, can you really kill a body this good?
And thus we come to the finale of The Kindly Ones, issue 69. It is nice, depending on your point of view. Death comes to Morpheus, and he recalls their conversation early in the series, where she threw some bread at him. He offers it to her now over this. You want to make some pigeons?
If that is what you wish.
I'm kind of neglectful of this, but if that is what you wish is kind of Morpheus's catchphrase throughout the book, which is hilariously ironic because Morpheus himself tends to follow an attitude of, what I wish is irrelevant. I have my responsibilities and rules. In the castle, the Corinthian kills a giant spider that was about to attack Matthew. According to Lucian, the creature was one of Morpheus's prisoners, but everything except what was in his private chest were released by the Furies. Well, it's a good thing Brute and Glob learned their lesson and certainly weren't released to cause more problems for people related to characters called the Sandman. Death thinks that Morpheus deliberately orchestrated his own downfall. He didn't have to answer Nawala's call. He could have left the dreaming and his responsibilities like Destruction did. The rules exist only because he follows the rules. There isn't any cosmic karma that would keep him from doing anything or punish him for his choice. But no, Morpheus says he really could not. And he's right. Even disregarding my theory about his trauma, The Sandman is very much a book about something else. A man who is forever changed by his experiences, but also refused to change. To Morpheus, he is the job. He is Dream of the Endless and could be nothing more. The king of stories who himself was a story. This is who he is because this is what his story is. To change, to be anything else than what he set out to be, would be to deny who he is and what he believes in. To change would mean he wasn't true to himself. It's why I think most of his relationships fail, honestly. Being with another person changes you, for better and for worse. It forces you to confront your own wants and desires and contrast them against someone else's. It requires a person to change, in subtle ways and significant ways. As a wise Vulcan once said,
"Change is the essential process of all existence."
And unfortunately, Morpheus couldn't really change. If you agree with my trauma theory, then he just is unwilling to go through the steps necessary to grow and recover from his experiences. It's not that he's weak or stupid or anything like that, it's just that he feels that he's become irrevocably altered by his experience, and if he can't be who he was before, then he does not want to carry on. And if his experiences over the last 60+ issues have taught him anything, it's that he needs to change, to rectify his mistakes and make up for the kind of person he was. And if he can't change to be a better Dream of the Endless, then it's time for him to accept his fate. For reality, for the people he cares about, for the dreamers, and for himself. He must die. Consequently, it's why I don't think Morpheus was actively trying to destroy himself. Why attempt to kill Lita otherwise, and then be surprised and saddened by Larissa's involvement? And so Morpheus offers his hand to his sister, and she takes it. Like the purpose of destruction, the old story must be lost so the new one can begin. Nawala decides to leave the Fae. Titania briefly tries to stop her, but when Morpheus dies, she feels it. Cluracan having warned her of this happening thanks to the funeral procession vision in World's End. Delirium feels her brother's death, but is overjoyed to find Barnabas again, who swears never to leave her side. Lucifer closes up his nightclub while Hal meets with Rose at Zelda's funeral, apologizing for what he said the day before. And in a nursing home in England, Alexander Burgess wakes up, for real this time, for the first time in years. Lita finally wakes up from her complete stupor, not even knowing who Larissa is, but she still helps her up. As I understand it, your actions have ensured that you will never see Daniel again. Wrong! I'd take a shower and then start running if I were you. Lots of people are going to want to hurt you or kill you for what you've done. Wrong again! Including me.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Yes, Lita does have an evil force pursuing her in a follow-up miniseries, but it has nothing to do with her part in killing Morpheus. And Larissa doesn't go after her either. It's amazing how completely wrong she is. But we'll get back to Lita in a bit. In the meantime, back in the castle, the emerald given to Daniel changes shape into a more appropriate pendant. and Daniel Hall becomes the new Dream of the Endless, fulfilling one of the future events seen by Destiny. And yeah, despite Daniel saying he's no longer Daniel, well, both for the purposes of distinguishing him from Morpheus and for the simple fact that his appearances after the Sandman still have many people calling him Daniel, that's what we're calling him. And the kindly ones themselves return to their previous task being meta. What did we make? What was it in the end? What it always is. A handful of yarn. A little weaving and stitching, some embroidering perhaps. A few loose ends, but that's only to be expected. It's the same old story. Whatever it turns into on the way, whatever it is you originally undertake to spin or knit or weave, keep it going long enough and, in the end, my lilies, it's always a winding sheet. Okay, but I was kind of hoping you were making a sweater. And thus we arrive at the final storyline of the Sandman, The Wake, beginning with issue 70. Each of the Endless has sent a messenger by some unknown power that even they don't understand, telling them that they have to gather outside the Necropolis Liturgy. Sadly, destruction does not come, but it's not too surprising. While he may mourn Morpheus, the simple truth is he decided to go no contact with them for a reason. Speaking of, unlike the village who laughed off the Endless when the first Despair died, they are smart enough to welcome them and bring them the cerements and books of ritual for this occasion. They can't go in themselves, so they create a golem of sorts to enter for them. Each imbues the golem, whom Delirium names Iblis O'Shaughnessy, with a piece of their power, with Death herself actually granting it life. And thus Iblis enters the catacombs that were mentioned in World's End, the disembodied voice asking which of them is dead.
You have come for the cerecloth then, and for the ceremony. Yes. They are yours. Take them. Please note that you bought them on clearance and they cannot be exchanged or returned.
In the dreaming, Daniel is undergoing the important job left behind by his predecessor, sitting on his ass not doing anything. I kid. Cain comes to him to return Abel to life after having been killed by the Furies, and he does so. He's apparently in the process of restoring the dreaming, and there's a lot to do. In Eve's cave, Matthew is sulking over Morpheus' death, thinking he should have stayed with him to the end. Eve informs him that the funeral for Morpheus will be tomorrow, and the wake is that night, but he just tells her to go away. As the Endless make their way to the dreaming for the wake, characters from across the series find themselves falling asleep. Nuala, Rose, Lita, Alex Burgess, Hob Gadling, even Richard Maddock, the garbage human being who held Calliope prisoner, all settling in for a restful sleep and dream. Oh boy, it's gonna be awkward having Lita there. Hey guys, I'm the one responsible for his death. No hard feelings though, right? Say, where are the hors d'oeuvres? Gilbert, aka Fiddler's Green, actually refuses to be resurrected, saying his death should have meaning. He had a good life, and it ended, which Daniel accepts. And thus humans, gods, fantastical creatures, fairies, and all manner of beings arrive in the dreaming for the wake, Hob Gadling even learning of Morpheus' demise. We enter issue 71 with the Endless, giant and imposing, constructing a place where the attendees can mourn, the narration informing us that even we, the audience, are in this place. It's kind of awkward going to a funeral for someone I don't know. I know I'm there to support someone else, but still. Daniel is not allowed to attend the wake or the funeral according to the ceremony rules, meaning he's left alone in the Dream Palace while Lucian heads off. Iblis is confused about who Daniel is if the ceremony is for Dream of the Endless, but Lucian and Abel explain that what they're mourning is a point of view, which would also be kind of a fun way to describe Doctor Who Regeneration. The new incarnation is a different point of view. We get testimonials about Morpheus, particularly from past lovers of his, starting with Calliope. When we made love, it was like a flame. Incredibly painful, but useful for boiling water. She explains that they started to drift apart after she got pregnant with Orpheus, though not because he was a deadbeat dad, but he had less time for her. Things going badly for Orpheus, they got into an argument, and he closed himself off to her. Matthew is just pissed off in general as he spots dreamers who just instinctively know what they're doing at this funeral, but then he spots Merv, angry that he's somehow alive again, despite being destroyed by the kindly ones. Which, dude, you died once too and came back as a bird. This is not an unusual thing to happen around here. Matthew goes to the palace and talks to Daniel, reiterating that he was Morpheus' friend and not his, but then Daniel confesses how weird this all is for him. Everything about him is new and different, except he's also older than suns and gods. He's simultaneously a brand new person and an ageless entity who is the concept of dreams. It is both his first day on the job and the mind-numbing drudgery of the 3 millionth day on the job. Oh hey, he's what job advertisements want, a 20-year-old with 30 years of experience. Daniel admits that he was the one who made the Corinthians save his life from the spider nightmare thing, that originally it was supposed to be his blood on the throne, but he didn't want Matthew to die even as a baby. Matthew also asks if he could be sent to where the other ravens who left went, and Daniel says he can if he wants, but only after the funeral. At the wake, Rose runs into Lita, who's better, I guess? You know, I'm pregnant. Not hardly very pregnant at all, but I am. Really? Uh-huh. Kill it, Rose Walker. Kill it now. Kill it before it breaks your heart. Or become Medusa. In retrospect, I really should have taken that job offer. Matthew asks Lucian why Morpheus let himself die, and he reinforces the thesis. I think sometimes, perhaps, one must change or die. And in the end, there were perhaps limits to how much he could let himself change. He knew something was wrong when he started filling his wardrobe with retro tees depicting old Disney movies. Larissa speaks next, and we get our backstory backfill about their relationship. That she came to the dreaming by accident several months after a game of You, and they just started talking, which grew into him courting her, and she believed that she loved him, but in retrospect believes that she was just overwhelmed by his love of her, and eventually his love waned when he didn't have to court her anymore. Again, to quote our Vulcan philosopher,
You may find that having is not so pleasing a thing after all as wanting.
And yet she also says that when it was clear he didn't really care about her anymore, she shouted and screamed and was hurt by all this, and then left and returned to her normal life, swearing she would never shed another tear for him. So clearly she felt something for him. As someone who's had bad breakups and cut off toxic friends, yeah, if we didn't feel anything for them, it wouldn't hurt at all. We'd have no reason to be angry, because we hadn't lost anything of value. But such friendships and loves hurt because we cared. Unsurprisingly, Clark Kent, Batman, and the Martian Manhunter are at the wake too, and discussing their dreams.
The one I hate is where I'm just an actor on a strange television version of my life. Have you ever had that dream? Doesn't everyone? Although there is also that dream I had where my parents were killed by xenomorphs. You ever have that one? I don't.
Give it a few years, John, and then you'll dream you're David Ogden Stiers. Love this panel with Constantine, and who I presume to be Dr. Occult and the Phantom Stranger.
Trenchcoat Brigade, away!
Matthew meets up with the other Endless, who ask him to say a few words at the memorial service. They disappear as the funeral starts up, Matthew and Barnabas heading out to get a good seat since, well, several billion people are going to be there, and it's time for issue 72.
Chapter 3, In Which We Wake.
God damn it, I just now got the double meaning of the storyline title. While Destiny opens with his eulogy to the assembled crowd of everyone, Daniel hangs out with guardians of his realm, who refuse to leave their defensive spot. While we move on to Bast's eulogy, a figure approaches the castle gates. And hey, in the crowd we have two rulers on either side of Rose and her brother. Emperor Norton, are the dead invited too? And Darkseid! Darkseid does not approve of these pews, not as comfortable as they should be. And who should the figure approaching the castle be but Destruction, still on his travels? Daniel doesn't recognize him at first, but when they head to the kitchen for something to munch on, he figures out who he is. Destruction explains that he didn't plan on coming, but then figured he'd stop by and offer Daniel some advice.
You've never been inclined to listen to my advice in the past, but, well, things change, don't they?
Yes, they do. For instance, I am now Dream the White. After Despair gives her eulogy, we move on to Wesley Dodds.
I only met the dead gentleman once. I heard he refused to rescue me from a fake Ragnarok. Thanks, jerk.
We, didn't talk.
He sued me for copyright infringement.
While some of the eulogies are presented, Destruction advises Daniel that he can always leave, even come with him and travel. And unlike Morpheus, Daniel simply says that he has no wish to leave, but he thanks him for the counsel before he heads out again. Matthew's eulogy is nice, talking about how Morpheus gave him a second chance, and occasionally they were friends. Daniel's a good kid and will do fine, and that he was a cool boss in the end. And these days, you treasure a boss who doesn't suck. After countless other eulogies, the funeral is finally over, as is the dream, and the mourners and guests make their exit, sending out the body of Morpheus, really just kind of a magic cloth from that tomb they got the cerements from, out into the infinite sea. Lita finds herself teleported to Daniel, recognizing him, though he denies he's the same baby, that anything mortal was burned away, and he's what's immortal about him. So what the hell? This comic did burn a baby to death? Lita's still not comprehending any of that, so just refers to him as Daniel. He says that the two are no longer bloodkin, and he's only permitted to take life to protect the dreaming, but he can punish as he so desires. And you lost your son forever. Okay, but that makes it sound like it's her fault that she lost her son, as if she'd have gotten him back if she hadn't done anything. Morpheus was clear he was going to take Daniel because he was going to become his successor. Go to hell. She wonders if he's going to hurt her. The person who is responsible for the death of the first despair will take the rest of eternity to die. Only then will his pain cease, and he had better cause for what he did than you. You sought vengeance, Lita, but that is a road that has no ending. Lots of disused gas stations, though. He kisses her forehead. You have my mark on you, Lita Hall. No one shall harm you. Put your life together once again. Well, it's a good thing she has his mark on her. I'm sure nothing bad will happen to her after this. Matthew tells him he did a good thing, explaining that this is their only chance to talk since he'll be busy with his family and all the representatives of other realms. He doesn't want to be Daniel's Raven, but he wants to be an advisor. Stick around and show him the ropes. Daniel also runs across Alexander Burgess, who sees himself in his dreams as a little boy. While Alex was already freed from his curse when Morpheus died, it'd be easy for Daniel to continue to punish him. But this is a new dream, a different one, and he sends him and all the other dreamers on their way to peace. And so the issue ends with Daniel, Dream of the Endless, going to dinner to meet with the rest of his family for the first time. It would be a sweet ending if the series was done with there, but we have some old business to tidy up for these last few issues. First up is Hob Gadling in issue 73. He and his new girlfriend head to a Renaissance festival. I like Ren fairs. You never know what kind of cool stuff you'll find there. But Hob, having lived through a lot of medieval times, just can't help but complain about the historical inaccuracies. After complaining and reminiscing and drinking for a while, he eventually heads to a nearby abandoned building and finds Death waiting for him. She confirms that Morpheus is dead and won't be meeting him in 94 years. As such, she wants to know if he wants to finally kick the bucket. He rambles for a while, about dying, about what lies hereafter, about how Morpheus wasn't the only constants in his life, even after all this time, but he liked having him. But ultimately, he's still not ready to die. Possibly not ever. Personally, I would have asked if she wanted to take over, or if Daniel wanted to follow in the family tradition, but hey, Hobbs got too much to live for. And in the end, he nods off to sleep while his girlfriend meets with some of her friends, and he dreams of Morpheus and destruction, walking off somewhere into the sunset with them. And as Hobbs says, there's only one way to end a story, really. They all lived happily ever after. Unless you've still got 2 more issues of a comic anyway. Issue 74 is not one of my favorites. It's pretty decent, but it's like many of the standalone issues throughout the series, about a Japanese nobleman in exile who recounts meeting Morpheus in one of the soft places we've mentioned before. After they part, he gets lost in the sands along with a kitten, before encountering Daniel, who frees not only him, but several other people who have been lost in the soft place. Still, one of those freed has useful advice for Daniel and this book as a whole. Everything changes, but nothing is truly lost. And thus we have reached the final issue, number 75. Is it a good ending?
It's an ending, that's enough.
I kid. You'll recall that a running plot thread from way back is Morpheus' deal with Shakespeare. We saw A Midsummer Night's Dream performed for the fairies it was based on, the first of 2 commissions, and now we find the second and final commission, as in November 1610, Shakespeare writes The Tempest for the Dream Lord. And unfortunately, like that one, I've never read or seen The Tempest, so some of this is as lost on me as that one was. I've seen Forbidden Planet, though. Still, the connections are clear, as readings of the play have interpreted some of it to match Shakespeare's own life. His career was close to being over, and the story here reflects that. A lot of the characters in his life, his friends, his daughter, his wife, seem to regard Will as having made mistakes in his choices, of his career path, of what he should have been writing about, how a lot of his work is garbage, etc. When Morpheus comes to check on him in December, it seems he's beginning to agree, looking back on his old works for a new printing and finding it mostly disappointing. And like the metatextual aspects of The Three Sisters, it makes me wonder in turn if this is also Gaiman reflecting on the Sandman. Could he have done things better? Is he disappointed by stories he included or rushed out? In January 1611, Shakespeare finishes it, Morpheus saying that he releases him from his service now that he's finished the play. However, Shakespeare wants a little more than that, being apprenticed to Morpheus for so much of his life, so they go into the dreaming to drink a toast. He asks why he was given his talent for writing, and Morpheus recounts how he saw him in the tavern, and he gave him his gift because he was already gifted and talented. He was no worse than any other man, because he had a good heart, and because he wanted it so badly. But now Shakespeare admits he's full of regrets, of how he took his lusts and passions and pains and turned them into pretty words, how he's no longer young and his daughter is being courted by someone he disapproves of, how he and his wife don't sleep in the same bed anymore, and how his characters feel more real to him than his actual friends. And he wants to know why this play. Why did Morpheus want a tragedy?
I wanted a tale of graceful ends. I wanted a play about a king who drowns his books and breaks his staff and leaves his kingdom. About a magician who becomes a man. About a man who turns his back on magic.
Given the time period, this could have been around the time Destruction left his position, rounding down, and it might have been something Morpheus was considering. Could he leave his island? Renounce everything that he was? But of course, as he says, no, he cannot do any such thing. He's set in his ways, and as we saw in his final moments, he could not bear to change himself more than he was. But in the words of a genius, of a master craftsman, he might see himself and fantasize. Or rather, see himself and dream of something different. Will awakens from his own dream meeting with Morpheus and writes the epilogue of The Tempest, ending the Sandman. The series began with an ad promising that it would show us fear and a handful of dust, but it ends with relief and freedom in a quill full of ink. Neil Gaiman's The Sandman is a lot of things. It is anthology, adventure, fantasy, horror, drama, romance, and above all, full of dreams and wonder. It changed itself as it went along, with different artists and different intentions with each story, with fairy tales and intrigue, fascinating premises and characters finding themselves in new, unexpected places where they were forced to reevaluate who they were and what they wanted. Did it end on a massive, reality-destroying battle? No. Would I have preferred Morpheus fight in some kind of weird cosmic war with surreal imagery against the Furies? Sure, but that's not what the book was about. Would I have wanted a happily ever after for every character I liked? Also sure, but sometimes that's just a dream. And despite all his flaws, I grew to like Morpheus as a character. And while he may not have become the person I wanted him to be, in the end, he stayed true to himself. And that's all we can really ask of anyone. But what of some of our players? What became of them afterwards? Well, as I talked about in the Dark Knight's Metal review, Daniel made a handful of appearances in the DC universe proper. Same for Death. Most notably hanging out with Lex Luthor one time, because why not? Aside from a massive amount of Sandman spin-off materials that went into various characters doing things, Lucifer, the Corinthian, even Merv Pumpkinhead getting his own mini, we even got a brief visit to Morpheus's glass prison in the opening storyline to Kevin Smith's Green Arrow run, where a book was stolen from Alexander Burgess that tied into other fun DC mystical lore. The Sandman is very much a part of the DC universe, even if most choose to not really bring it up, possibly out of respect for Neil Gaiman. But then again, some of these characters were DC first, so their stories had to continue. And that's where I wanted to end on a happier note for the one who suffered the most in the series, Lita Hall. After the Sandman, she starred in a miniseries dealing with Kronos of the Greek gods trying to use her to destroy the Kindly Ones, and in the process, she manages to start recovering from the events of the series. Though I really don't like the art style for it, especially with whatever the hell they did to poor Daniel in this thing.
There. Sure glad I don't look stupid in this.
However, more relevant is what brings us over to the pages of James Robinson's, David S. Goyer's, and most especially Jeff Johns' JSA series in the late 90s/early 2000s. Because Jeff Johns had never met a story he didn't want to shove a retcon into, he set to work tying together several things, and fixing some mistakes along the way, so get this. Remember Armageddon 2001, which we talked about last year, and the fiasco of making Hawk into Monarch and then extant? Well, it turns out that Dove wasn't actually killed. It was an illusion to drive Hawk insane. In turn, she gave birth to a child who represented order and chaos in one body, since that's what Hawk and Dove's whole backstory involved. And that child was a reincarnation of Hector Hall, who in turn took over the powers of Dr. Fate. Naturally, he wanted to find his wife, but she had gone missing in that time. It turns out Nabu, the original Dr. Fate and sorcerer behind his power, was hiding her from him to try to make him better at his job. Good job with your whole protection of her, Daniel. Is this because she never let you stuff yourself with candy as a baby? Once they uncovered this, Lita was freed, and she was clearly mentally doing a lot better, recalling only that her time with the Sandman stuff was very confusing and taxing on her, though she clearly remembered Daniel and had moved on from it. Hell, they even take on Brute and Glob again, who were probably freed by the Kindly Ones, along with the other creatures imprisoned in the Dreaming. And it's very satisfying for her to use her super strength to kick their asses. We see some shadows of Daniel in later stories, in particular telling the supervillain Mordru to leave his parents alone. It's clear that Daniel has some affection for them, even if he was denying that part of himself right after he became Dream. Sadly, she got caught up in the events of another reality storm, the Spectre's quest to destroy all magic in the lead-up to Infinite Crisis. She and Hector got stranded, Hector mortally wounded. Fortunately, Daniel had made her an offer in her dreams to come stay with him in the Dreaming, and she took it. And that was the last we saw of them, even post-New 52 or Rebirth. But hey, she got reunited with her husband and son, so I'm okay with how that turned out. There really isn't much else I can say about the Sandman at this point. It's of course still widely available as one of the greatest comic works of all time. Certainly one of the most popular that wasn't a superhero. I may not have liked every part of it in this revisit, but it's certainly still full of heart and amazing journeys for those featured in it, and it's always fun to revisit. And I've only scratched the surface of the universe it inhabits, all the characters and stories within. Morpheus' final decision of what he must do to stop the Furies is, ironically enough, reflected in Shakespeare's most famous writing, Hamlet's to be or not to be speech. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in this sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. But while Hamlet is reflecting that his suicide may lead to a worse fate, here the Dream Lord himself ends his own life to end his troubles once and for all. And whether he truly is now walking with destruction, freed from his burdens and hobgabbling's dreams, and what dreams have come if that's the truth, or is someplace else, we know that he met his end with dignity and love from death herself. Hopefully we'll all meet our end as well as he did. So to all of you out there, a toast. To absent friends, lost loves, old gods, and the season of mists, may each and every one of us always give the devil his due. But to add one final hope to you all, pleasant dreams.
Mr. Sandman, bring us our dreams.
We are the kindly ones. We are the Eumenides.
Yeah, well, Eumenides this!
No, Merv, like this.
Eumenides nuts!
Got him! They'd probably murder me harder. Hello, my friends. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on new video releases. If you'd like to support future videos, you can check out my Patreon or purchase a t-shirt via Teespring or Shark Robot. Thanks for watching!